let me clean this up first. I can never get work done without just showing you what it's looking like so far, because things are changing so quickly, and I know I'm gonna get distracted when I have to get work done if I don't look around first. So we're gonna look around first. You need to see this dwarf Cavendish banana, and it's gonna flower for the first time. A few days ago, I remember coming out here and I was like, the leaves are starting to look very, very different. And you can start to see that's the beginning of the flowering stage. And in a few weeks, we should have the little flower stalk coming out. And because it's in a new microclimate, I'm pretty sure that this year we're actually gonna get bananas. We're approaching our last frost date. Is it last frost date, first frost date? I don't know. During February, we still run the chance of there being a frost that comes through. Last year it was hail, and right before the hail, literally days before I had planted out all my tomato and pepper transplants, I lost a lot of seedlings to a frost that we had in February on Valentine's Day. So I'm waiting until after Valentine's Day to start planting out more things, and I don't have any seeds started this year, unfortunately, but that's okay because the garden is still growing like crazy and there's still a lot of stuff that I can direct. So the rest of the tropicals, like the avocados, are looking so beautiful. This one is a Little Cotto avocado. What else did I want to show you? The roses are also starting to look really pretty. These are some iceberg roses that I bought on clearance a few years ago, and they are definitely loving this weather. They're putting out a bunch of new growth, and there's bloom still on them, but eventually they'll get to a point where they'll be covered, just absolutely covered and adorned in white blooms. Look how pretty those are. One of my favorite things to look at is this arbor. The star jasmine is growing so much better, and as it continues filling out, it definitely gives a lot more of a whimsical feel to the garden. And then look at my mom's roses. Those Don Juan climbing roses definitely took a while to start taking off, but look at them now. Look at those blooms. They're such a velvety, vibrant red color. If I show you from this point of view, you can see how the trellis is definitely filling out with all of the canes, but the canes have gotten so tall that I definitely need to tie them back. And then you can see a few holes in the shade cloth, and that's just because of the crazy winds that we've been having, and my shade structure started ripping through some of them because of some of the nails that somebody probably didn't drill in correctly, or some of the screws. So that's my fault, but overall the shade cloth is holding up pretty good. I know that it's kind of weird that I have the shade cloth up still, and usually I take it down for the cooler months and then I put it back up as it starts warming up. I wanted to experiment this year to see how the garden would hold up if I left the shade cloth on, because it's just so tedious to take it off and then put it back up again. And it heats up so quickly here in the low desert that winter doesn't last for very long. And yes, the days do get shorter, but I just wanted to test it out and see how the garden would react. And so far, I think it's looking pretty good. For example, here's one of the beds. This is the shadiest bed basically all year round, and you can still see that things are growing pretty good in here. It definitely helped that I pruned back the peppers, and look at these tomatoes. They haven't fruited like some of the other ones throughout the garden, but they've been growing. They've been growing and growing and growing, and I know that as soon as it starts warming up just a little bit more, these are gonna be covered in clusters of tomatoes. But in the meantime, they've been loving this spot. That's even with having a 50% shade cloth above them. And then I also have things like these pumpkins that are still alive that usually would have been torn to shreds by now with all the windy days we've been having. And then recently I planted out this garden bed, and you can see all the things starting to sprout. These tomatoes didn't really even care that I was blocking out half of the light, because look how massive they are. And then same thing over here. These tomatoes don't really seem to mind, but I will say that this whole portion of the garden does get a little bit more morning light. But look at those clusters. That is beautiful. The peas are looking pretty great. And then look at the garlic. You can see some of the light coming through, and everything seems to be growing very well over here. There's only one bed that I noticed a definite difference, having the shade cloth up plus the way I planted things. This bed right here usually gets a ton of light during the summer months because the light starts coming in this way. But right now I'm noticing that everything that's back there is a little bit more stretching for light, and then everything over here, even though it's all planted at the same time, is looking beautiful, because this had a little bit more sunlight versus everything back there that's a little bit more stunted. And then I think that also happened because we have the 50% shade cloth plus this massive eggplant right here that sort of started shading everything out. The rest of the bed seems to be doing really good for the most part. Here we have a bunch of kale. The beans are still hanging in there and they're still producing. I thought they were dying back by this point. Overall, I would say the garden looks really, really good despite leaving the shade cloth up. And I think maybe this wouldn't work in all places because whenever we go up north, I notice that it's way more like cloudy. So I think if you were to have shade cloth up there, the plants would probably be super stunted. But here in the low desert, it doesn't really get that cold. And even though the days are shorter, I feel like we still get quite a bit of sunlight. So that's probably why it worked out so well. So I haven't noticed that my plants are struggling or anything. I just feel like leaving the shade cloth up definitely slowed down the growth. Whenever it's really sunny, the plants start exploding like crazy. And right now they just haven't been doing that. They've just kind of been chilling and growing slowly. And that's actually been a lot more helpful for me because months of October, November, and December are the busiest for our family. And same thing with January. We have a lot of like events to start off the year. And so I just get really busy. So the garden being slow in growth has definitely helped me out so that I'm not overwhelmed with the harvest and the upkeep. This year, one of my main goals is to have this portion of the yard covered in shade cloth as well, and to have the trellises completely covered in fruit because I'm tired of looking at these dried vines. It doesn't look horrible, but I know that it can look prettier than that. I'm gonna start direct sowing my watermelon, Armenian cucumbers, all of the beautiful heat-loving climbing vines. That's gonna make the garden feel a lot more magical again. So anyways, with that, oh yeah, you know what else I wanted to show you? Look how beautiful those blooms are. I always feel like they look like delicate little lanterns. And I love them. So we should get some more blueberries this year. The fruit trees, it looks like they're starting to wake up again and they just fell asleep literally a few weeks ago. For example, this is my Florida Prince Peach. And look at those buds, they're already starting to break through. So that means that soon this tree is probably gonna be covered in peach blooms and they're gonna look so beautiful. And then also look at everything else that I've planted throughout these last few months. Like these leeks are looking amazing. They're growing so well. They already look like a huge improvement from last year's leeks. And there's a few things that have definitely self-seeded themselves, like these lettuces. But because I do have turf, anything that direct sows itself into the turf, I just rip it out. I've gotten a lot of questions about whether the grass here in the garden is turf, and it is turf. I know. We installed it at the same time that I started gardening. It was part of the whole backyard transformation. My husband, my brothers, my cousins all had to work together to be able to take it to the backyard and roll it out because it was extremely, extremely heavy. Before installing it, we were thinking about putting down pea gravel, and then we decided to just invest in this. And then after I started gardening and learning more about soil health and all of that, I was like, dang, I regret it so much. Even now I regret it and I wish I could just take it out, but we've only had it for a few years and it was really expensive. And I have so many containers that are super, super heavy on top of them, like hundreds of containers, that it would be extremely difficult for me to remove it. It would be really difficult for me to remove it with my husband. We would probably have to pay somebody to come out here and do it. And I don't know how much that would cost. It would probably be very, very expensive. And the reason that I have all of my trees and stuff in containers is because I never planned on having this be my permanent garden forever. Like, I want to keep this house and I want to keep a portion of this garden intact, but I always plan to take my trees with me one day whenever we buy a few acres of land to be able to place them in the ground so that I can take care of them because they've been with me since the beginning. And I don't know if that will happen, like if I'll still take them with me someday, or if I'll take cuttings from them and then propagate those and then continue to let the tree live, but also leave these here. I don't know. Look, I'm not a teacher when it comes to this stuff, and I'm probably not doing it right. People, professionals are probably like gasping right now. But this is just what works for me because I watch so many videos and I'm still left feeling confused. So this is how I've been pruning my grapevines. The first thing I'm gonna be chopping off are these tendrils. And then I want the canes to be about this long because I'm gonna reuse these right now. More grape bunches doesn't always mean better grapes. This is gonna take me a while. This would be a lot faster right now if I wasn't trying to preserve these grapevines for my trellises. Ow!